Well, this is part 2 of the video that I just started, and I'm going to say, it's pretty, it seems like whenever I really get into something, the camera runs out of space or battery, memory card. So I get kind of cut off in the middle, and I don't really have software for patching. I'm going to try to put this together into one video, but really, I guess I wanted to get to the point, and I wasn't able to because I ran out of time. I was talking about the quintessence, the fifth element, if you will. You could call it the essence of spirit, the essence of truth. But here's the thing, and this is really what I'm trying to get across in this video, is I have a difficult time talking about, philosophy and alchemy and science and all these, and religion and all these things without sounding kind of like, I don't know. I guess I don't want to pretend like I know, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not here to pretend like I know what's going on. There's a lot of guys out there saying, hey, this symbol means this, and this means this, and if you don't realize it, you're an idiot. I've just stepped completely away from all the people making claims. My claims are not here to say, look at me, or this is what I've discovered, but rather, if you're searching for the same truths that I am through philosophy and understanding life, and for the right reasons, and the same reasons that I believe are right anyway, which is seeking to understand in order to better ourselves, then you can understand that when people argue whether alchemy is a physical or a spiritual practice, they're both right. Nobody's wrong. It's a moot point. It's not even worth arguing. There was a revival, in the 16th and 17th centuries, people trying to attach a spiritual significance to earlier alchemical traditions, thinking that that was some new approach to it, saying, well, maybe they meant it metaphorically, it was an allegory. And yes, they're right, but at the same sense, it was an actual literal process, alchemy was, of changing lead into gold. Now, people have disputed this for thousands of years, of course, or at least 1,000 years, since, I guess modern alchemy, but the original chem, the word chem, is from ancient Egypt. I mean, it goes back probably 10,000 years. I mean, at least 6,000 to 7,000 years that we know of, to where people were putting together these different compounds. And alchemy brought about modern chemistry, and it showed us many different things that were discovered. It wasn't just looking for gold. And the misconception is that they were trying to always trying to get rich somehow. Sure, there were charlatans that worked for kings and queens, claiming, hey, I'll work under your wing if you, fund me, I'll keep working to try to make gold, And the idea that the Philosopher's Stone was an actual object, or rather a red cinnabar-looking substance, powdery type rock, that in itself is a pure form, but that is used along with gold as a gold seed to grow the gold. Now, this is a really important point because a lot of people just scoff at the idea. Well, I'll try to post a link in the description. Last night, actually, I was reading, if I could remember the fella's name, he's like one of the top alchemy researchers in the world, as far as I know. He works at Johns Hopkins, I believe, University, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he's been doing several different searches into, the deeper meanings of alchemy. And him and some other people, I guess they got together and put together all these 16th, 17th century papers and dug through it all and really tried to understand it. And went through a process of making what he considered to be this, this mercury, which contained this gold seed. Now, it has to be purified and perfect, but according to the article, over a period of months he worked on this thing. And once he put it to the final heating stage, he tried different temperatures over a period of a few weeks. And then all of a sudden one morning he came in and there was a little tiny tree of gold. Well, that sounds silly at first, but you understand that gold grows like a crystalline substance, so it would be more like a snowflake, if you will, but it takes a tree form. The early alchemists would talk about the gold tree, and people would assume that it's a metaphor because of the idea that when you plant a seed and you grow something, you're growing, let's say a plant. You can plant it in the fall or you can plant it in the spring. There's many different times you can plant. And all the rules can be twisted and changed, but there's certain things that have to be done. Food, water, and temperature, sunlight to grow. Now it's the same way when we nurture our alchemical selves, our alchemical nature. By seeing that symbolic process, or at least the literal process, we can understand the spiritual process and say, So if I feed myself the right information and I give myself the right balance of sunlight and nutrients, which can be awareness, knowledge, humility, you know, honesty, all the different things that make a person what they are, without leaning too far one direction. If you give yourself too much humility, you know, it may be like overwatering, and you start to see the way that the different compounds, or rather the different elements, relate to the different personalities of the human. It's a really amazing process, and you know, they say it can take, you know, from a decade to several decades for a person to really make it to the point where they consider themselves to be, I guess, enlightened, if you will. But that word is not used. The whole idea is to understand this anima mundi and this this creation that we have, without calling it creationism, if that makes sense. What it comes down to is that there's dogmatic religion, and then there's many really strong-willed atheists who feel very strongly that there is nothing beyond us, and the philosophers have always found themselves just kind of pushed down, and they have to sit in a room together and talk about things, and realize that the rest of the world's going to think they're either crazy, delusional old men. The stories that have been made about the old alchemists and calling them, you know, saying that they had delusions, or they drank too much, or maybe too much lead, you know, a little lead poisoning, or maybe mercury poisoning, working on all this stuff. But when you look at these people's work and what they were trying to say, it's almost indisputable. It's like you can't dispute some of the things because they don't need to be disputed. In other words, they're not things that conflict with what we want to believe. They're things that reflect what we observe. So rather than saying God wants you to do this, Jesus wants you to do that, or Muhammad said this, it says this is what's in front of you. That there's a law of correspondence, that there's a law of mentality, that things are aware, that the universe is aware. I have my radio on in there, and I'm going to turn it down because it's really distracting me. When I get into this stuff, I get really, really into it, and I want to explain like my point without getting off subject and off base, and I do it all the time. I get into a subject and it's like twists and turns down different branches, and whoop, too far out on this branch, and end up sometimes losing my point. Which is fine, because here I am, just a guy talking about alchemy, something that a lot of people just scoff and don't even believe anyway. But by saying alchemy, I'm referring to the component of it, which is, I guess, I should just read this little thing from Manly P. Hall. It's from the Secrets of All Ages, Secret Teachings. It's from the conclusion in the book, and I just wanted to flip down to a part that really kind of sums up a lot of what I'm trying to get across. He was talking about some stories about Aristotle, and then he says, "Thus it is demonstrated that to capture a man, it is not sufficient to enslave his body. It is necessary to enlist his reason. That to free a man, it is not enough to strike the shackles from his limbs. His mind must be liberated from the bondage to his own ignorance. Physical conquests must ever fail, for, generating hatred and dissension, it spurs the mind to avenging of an outraged body. But all men are bound, whether willingly or unwillingly, to obey that intellect in which they recognize qualities and virtues superior to their own. That the philosophic culture of ancient Greece, Egypt, and India excelled that of the modern world must be admitted by all, even by the most confirmed of modernists. The golden era of Greek aesthetics, intellectualism, and ethics has never since been equaled. The true philosopher belongs to the most noble order of men, the nation or race which is blessed by possession of illumined thinkers, and is fortunate indeed, and its name shall be remembered for their sake. In the famous Pythagorean school at Crotona, philosophy was regarded as indispensable to the life of man. He who did not comprehend the dignity of the reasoning power could not properly be said to live. Therefore, when through innate perverseness a member either voluntarily withdrew or was forcibly ejected from the philosophic fraternity, a headstone was set up for him in the community graveyard. For he who had forsaken intellectual and ethical pursuits to re-enter the material sphere with its illusions of sense and false ambition was regarded as one dead to the sphere of reality. That's some pretty heavy stuff. I mean, basically when one of the, mystery school initiates or whatever you want to call it, I hate that name, mystery school, because what they called an adept was a student in the mystery schools, which honestly weren't even called the mystery schools. They went by so many different names. People talk about the Rosy Cross or the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, how they've carried on the traditions from those old lamps who go back to, Paracelsus, Aristotle. All these people were very, very well versed in the symbology behind all of this. And so anyway, I'll go on real quick. The life represented by the thraldom of the senses, the Pythagoreans conceived to be spiritual death, while they regarded death to the sense world as a spiritual life. Philosophy bestows life in that it reveals the dignity and purpose for living. Materiality bestows death in that it benumbs or clouds the faculties of human soul, which should be responsive to the enlivening impulses of creative thought and ennobling virtue. How inferior to these standards of remote days are the laws by which men live in the 20th century? Today man, a sublime creature with the infinite capacity for self-improvement, in an effort to be true to false standards, turns from his birthright of understanding, without realizing the consequences, and plunges into the maelstrom of material illusion. The precious span of his earthly years he devotes to the pathetically futile effort to establish himself as an enduring power in the realm of unenduring things. Gradually, the memory of his life as a spiritual being vanishes from his objective mind, and he focuses all his partly awakened faculties upon the seething beehive of industry, which he has come to consider the sole actuality. From the lofty heights of his selfhood, he slowly sinks into the gloomy depths of ephemerality. He falls to the level of the beast, and, in brutish fashion, mumbles the problems arising from his all too insufficient knowledge of the divine plan. Here, in the lurid turmoil of a great industrial, political, commercial inferno, men writhe in self-inflicted agony, and, reaching out into the swirling mists, strive to clutch and hold the grotesque phantoms of success and power. So we know it. It's all fleeting. It's in every line of, everybody sang about it, poems have talked about it, stories, the movies, that money does not buy happiness. In the end, the person always suffers because of it, one way or another. And that's not just a cop-out or excuse for people who don't have money, which was something I had to process for a long time. In other words, are we just told to be happy? Take the line, the meek shall inherit the earth, for example. Really? I mean, is this basically saying, or it's easier for a camel to walk through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. Apparently that's a Bible verse. Now that would be ludicrous. Ludicrous. A rich man getting into heaven. Now, what is rich? What if you're rich in spirit and truth? And when you talk about rich man, what if a person has power and influence and money and they use it for good purposes? You cannot generalize people because they have money. Those components are because their people fear those who have power over them, and they resent them. But those who have, obtained the power, the true power, they don't want power. And this is why any philosopher, any alchemist who truly made it and created the Philosopher's Stone, in my belief, any man who actually did it had to be true of heart, because apparently you have to be a philosopher that's honest with yourself and true of heart in order to do any type of the work, the great work. And in order to literally make gold, let's say, you have to be and understand it and not be in it for the money. And that's just something that goes without saying, because these are men of truth and honor. And I want to be one of those men. Money's never been my concern. I just want to make enough to survive so I can continue my works. And I was thinking the other day with the lottery, I was like, if I wanted, I'd take, because the Powerball's way up there, like $1 billion. My wife and I were saying, I'd take take half of it and put it into a philosophy school, or start a mystery school, somewhere, not a mystery school, but rather a place where people can go and exchange information and knowledge. Modern, not academics or scholars, but thinkers. We need more thinkers. And this all goes back to the philosopher king theories, that we need philosophers to be our leaders rather than leaders to tell our philosophers what to do. It's very complex social structure that we know isn't working the way it is. So it's my belief that each person has to seek their own alchemy. They have to become aware of the components of who they are. A man should never let their emotions rule the day. If you find that your emotions get the best of you, then you don't have control of your truth. It means there's something lacking. If you get angry too often, it means that perhaps there's something you need to look at within yourself. Maybe people are saying things that are true. Or, it could be an external substance maybe that you're consuming, but it could be very well just an internal angst that's causing this external behavior. And some people are overly sad. Some people are overly fearful. And all these things stem from, let's say, just damages in the energy body. Rips and tears, things that we need to patch up and work on. And once we've patched that up and we have our emotions in check, where we don't react in anger to anybody who calls us a name or jump down people's throats and have to use foul language to prove ourselves, then we start to understand it. That's the truth. That's what we're after. And then you see that men humbly move off into stages where they no longer share. And this is why I talk about these things. Because I feel like the true alchemists in the world, the ones who have made big discoveries, personal, physical, metaphorical, whatever, aren't on YouTube talking about it. They're not writing books about it. Many of these people are just content to know what they call, those who would abuse that type of knowledge and power. They're content to have them just think, well, you can think I'm a fool. I don't care. They understand. And so it's an interesting process, and decades from now, maybe I'll get the physical aspect of it. Maybe I could make gold down the road, but it's not my goal. My goal is to understand the mental aspect of it. So as I live my life, I live it to its fullest, never associating myself with who I think I am, or the car I drive, the house I live in, or the job I have, or the clothes I wear. But to be a man standing naked in a windstorm and standing strong. I'll try. Have a good day, everybody.